So, David, thank you for coming. Before we start, one last housekeeping thing. I would like Sarah to call roll for the search committee and for the writers committee. So, David, we'd like to continue this in the same process that we did earlier, where it's conversational, so that we would continue in the same vein. There are no right or wrong answers. This is an opportunity for the writers and for people here and who are also listening in to ask you questions about how you would perform the duties of technical advisor and chef to keep your outlook and your program. So I'll open up the floor for questions.
I think maybe the first part is that I think the Active Athlete Committee has actually seen the application. Is that right?
Yeah.
So, and I think a lot of the people here probably haven't seen the applications. Would that also be correct? Okay. Now I have a copy of mine, and I think certainly I'm guessing this will be allowed, right? That I think that we can make copies, and so if people want to come by through the weekend and see what it wrote down, I'd be happy to have that happen for anybody. So I think maybe a little overview of a process first, just because you don't have the applications or haven't read what the search committee did. We were asked to give a written application. We were asked then to give an oral kind of application process through in the calls, and so you guys haven't really been part of that process, and so I wanted to give a little bit of maybe an overview of what I thought. I think the one thing that I want to look at is I really do believe that medal winning, to win medals out of the Olympic Games and win medals at the World Championships, which has to be one of the goals, is not actually the goal. To me, it's a result. And it's a result of how you do the process. It's a result of the things that you do. It's the result of the people that you have in front of you, the people and the way that you are riding, the way that you are competing. And so the medals are a byproduct of how really excellent you are as riders and excellent that country is. Because I really believe that the number one goal of the United States is to be the number one country in the world in eventing, of which we don't really believe that it is right now. It needs to be the number one. And how do you judge that? You would judge that by winning medals, obviously. But you also have to judge that by how many people do we have in the rider rankings in the top 5. I believe that we need to have 2 in the top 5 really 2 to 3 times out of every 5 years. I believe we have to have the number 1 rider in the world in the top 5 rankings. In the number 1 rider in the world in the rankings. We need to have that multiple times within a 5-year period. So when we have that type of level of the things that we're doing, I believe that we need to win a European CCI, which we have not done since 1999, that we need to win, having the ability to win international CCIs outside of our country, in Europe, outside of the Olympic Games process and outside of the World Games process, that when we have that type of confidence, ability to walk onto any stage and know that we own it. I think that has to be the goal. Then medals happen, because everybody owns the game. And I believe that is a huge part of the belief, the confidence in the system, the belief in your own riding, and the belief in your own programs that can produce those type of roles. And what I really feel the role of a coaching process is actually to guide and get into and help nurture your programs, your individual programs, instead of waiting just to come to a training session or coming to whatever coaching situation you're in, but to get into yours. Who are you working with? Who are you working with on an everyday basis? Who are you working with in dressage? Who are you working with as maybe an overall coach? Or who are you working with in show jumping? And come have that conversation and see if we can raise... Hello? Somebody in there somebody on the phone actually might want to start, is it star one still? Star one and mute, because we got some extra conversations here. So I believe the relationship with your own personal coaches is the direction that I feel as a way to go. And to try to have that conversation so you know what's going, have an influence on the level of what you're doing, and if then guide it towards maybe somebody else is in the opportunity. We have great opportunities for expertise in the two other disciplines, one all over the country. In the West Coast, certainly down in Southern California, they got the concentration of highest level dressage riders that we have anywhere else in the country for an extended period of time. Same thing with show jumpers. We have that on the East Coast, the work with Katie, the work with Gunnar, whoever, right? I think that is the access. And I believe that in the way that the budget is right now, is that the budget has it about, well, in 2013, that in 2013 there's about $185,000, maybe even a little bit more, $85,000 that we can swing around and get out of the current programs that they're in and get them into using them for other programs. And I believe half of that, or about $100,000 of that money, actually should be used to send more people to Europe. So I believe that there should be 2 4-star trips per year going over. I believe that we should support the Badminton-Lemuelin thing and also the Burley thing. Then also I think there has to be some 3-star trips, spring and autumn. And there's we have about $200,000 worth of athlete grants now. We can send 10 athletes out there on the programs we're doing now. I think another $100,000 ought to be used out of the budget. They're freeing up the budget to send another 5 or 6 people over to Europe on a kind of a supported basis. Then there's another about $85,000, and I believe that some of that could maybe get into different programs of support. But I think one of the major things is that quite a bit of that money, actually we got to target it and get it into the riders' hands. And I believe we need to get into the riders' hands to start to pay for their education. That's happening a little bit now, but I think it could be more extensive. This is the first year, or kind of year, 18 months, where that actually program has started to happen. But I believe we can take more money and get it into your hands for your own education. Because the big thing about owners and getting kind of an ownership, and where do we struggle with owners, I don't believe that it's the ownership or getting the owners that is necessarily the problem, because I don't think the buy-in from the first cost is the hard part. It's the maintenance problem. It's the month and yearly basis of money that is the expensive part of owners. And so is there a way that we could actually, not just through prize money, but through our own programs, be able to help reduce the cost for the owners, be able to pass some of this money on, a lot like they actually do in England and they do in Europe? And how can we get that to actually attract somebody that this actually isn't going to, you don't have to sell your house in order to support one of our riders. And I think that's a real kind of important part of a different way to look at the budget, and a different way to look at the money available down for the programs that can get into your hands of how you use it. So to strengthen, to go back to kind of the original thought process, is actually to strengthen your own programs. This is a big country, and it's a big country, 3,000 miles wide, 2,000 miles north and south. It's going to be hard to get the one person. And we've got a lot of expertise in this country, and we need to use it. We have a lot of expertise within our own sport, and we have a lot of expertise within the other two sports that we will also need some help with. So that, for the coaching thing, I think it is the guidance and the management and the pushing of it, along with the individual riders of number one, assessing where you are, having a true assessment of where you are, having a true assessment of maybe not why you're not as successful. Why are you not number one in the world? What is the difference between the number one in the world and you? This was a conversation that I had with the Canadians. What's the difference? Is it technical? Is it a riding style? Is it management? Is it just changing your thought process? And the first conversation I had with them is, let's change your expectation of what's possible. And then how do we go about it? Assessing where you are in a very realistic way, which is not always, that can be a humbling experience at times, to truly know where you are. And then how do you go on and you plan to be the number one in the world? Because if we don't have a couple of you guys, for me, to be truly the number one in the world, then I think the true international successes are to be harder to come up with. So I'd love to kind of go from then and open it up to conversation. I'm hoping that this is going to be a two-way conversation and not a one-way conversation. Okay, so maybe it is a one-way conversation. Okay. We are, and Becky Holder is just standing up to grab the microphone, and hopefully I'll repeat the question to you as she asked it.
I'm looking here at the Eventing Search Committee's timeline, proposed timeline.
I'm sorry?
I'm looking at the Eventing Search Committee's proposed timeline for the potential candidate who's hired. And one of the things in spring of 2011 is the beginning of shadowing Mark through the Pan Ams and the Olympic Games, and potentially serving as a developing rider coach. How do you reconcile that with your conflict of interest with the Canadians?
So the question from Becky was, in the timeline of the application process, there was a time period for shadowing Mark around in the next 2 years, including possibly being the developing rider coach. And how would I reconcile that with the Canadian thing? So you guys all get that on the phone? Did you get the question? Okay, it's just about shadowing Mark, and over the next 2 years. And I think the real issue is when the application was started that I heard you guys come up with, it was, if we have somebody from Europe who really doesn't know the American system, it's good, they have to learn, there's a steep learning curve. I was fortunate enough to be with Mark over the last 15 years, riding all the way up until 6 years ago, and feel like I know the system quite well and know the personalities involved and know most of you riders, personally, as well as from the developing point and knowing a lot by going to all the events and watching all the events, knowing who the next level of riders are. I work with some of them on a private basis because they call me up and ask to, have some work. That's fine. That's always available. So I think I would not be available to be the developing rider coach in the next 2 years. My commitment is totally to the Canadians all the way through the Olympic Games in 2012. That is clear. That is something that I won't give up because I have made my promise to them. And I really enjoy it. I think it's been a big part of my coaching education, and I look forward to the next 2 years, and I look forward to the next years of being very competitive. We fully expect to win 2 medals in the next 2 championships, and